we have for you the first speaker, our distinguished Toastmaster, Lisa Evans. She is known as the Story Midwife. She's a professional speaker, an author, a certified world-class speaker coach, a speechwriter, and an improv actor. Woo. Lisa helps leaders globally to create powerful presentation skills, ladies and gentlemen, in compelling storytellings. So are you excited yet? Doesn't sound like it. Have you got your coffee? Not enough. All right, we should have our coffee afterwards. But I'm very sure Lisa's presentation will be much, much better than your coffee fix. All right? Are you guys ready? Please put your hands together and welcome distinguished Toastmaster Lisa Evans.
Wow. It's wonderful to see you all here this morning. It's my absolute privilege to be here from Perth, Western Australia, District 17. And thank you so much to Victor Ong and the organising committee for inviting me to be one of your speakers. Are you all ready for a great session on storytelling? Yeah. That's amazing. So by the end of the 1 hour that we have together this morning, you'll walk away with some practical tools and tips so that you can take your storytelling skills to that next level. And you're going to be doing some of the work, so there are a couple of activities. So hopefully you've got something to write on, or you can write on your smartphones. And I was thinking, have you all got your masks ready for this evening? Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering, how on earth are we going to recognise one another when we all have our masks on? There'll be all sorts of mischief. I'm wondering if you're going to recognise me when I've got a mask on. It's pretty hard for me to hide, right? 10 years ago, if anyone had said to me, "You'll stand on stage under the bright lights, in front of a big crowd with nowhere to hide," I would have said, "Me? No way. I'm shy. I don't have anything worth saying that anyone else would want to hear." And growing up as a shy kid, I did what many introverts do. I donned the cloak of extroversion in order to fit into a world that seemed to favour those who always had something to say. Because I believed that in order to be liked, to be smart, to be popular, I had to be loud, smiley, and talkative. So I became driven at an early age to try and fit in and to please others. Raise your hands if you've ever been guilty of being a people pleaser. And as a kid, I was reluctantly in the spotlight on stage as a dancer, performing in shows and competitions. And my mum was a brilliant seamstress. I had the most amazing costumes made from luxurious fabrics, chiffon, lace, and satin in all colours, and they were donned with sequins and feathers. And my mum tailored these costumes to perfection. They fit me like a glove. And yet, I didn't feel like I fit inside them. I was sparkly on the outside, but painfully shy on the inside, wearing those sequins and feathers like a mask to present to the world, the one that I thought the world wanted, getting my glitter on to please others, trying desperately to fit in. And then when I was 8 years old, I had a growth spurt and I became really tall for a girl my age. So I began to develop bad posture, to shrink and make myself small because I wanted to be like my teeny tiny delicate ballerina friends. I got to play the part of the boy in the pantomime. "You're too tall to be a dancer," is what my teacher told me every single lesson. Have you ever been told that you're too this for that? The story sticks. right? Let me ask you a question. What stories do you carry from your childhood? Do those stories serve you? Or do those stories stall you, stop you, and hold you back? Because it's only when we have the courage to loosen the grip on the stories that no longer serve us that we are able to make way for new ones. At 17 and a half, I began my nurse training in London. 3 years to be a general nurse, followed by 2 years to be a midwife. And being a midwife is a job with such joy. Coaching, nurturing, supporting, and helping bring new life into the world. It really was my dream job. And with my dream job came travel. I answered an ad in the paper to be a nurse in Sydney, and it was for a 12-week contract. It was 8 weeks work and 4 weeks travel. And next month will be my 30th anniversary of living in Australia. So it turned out to be a very, very long working holiday. Now, I can remember day one in Australia like it was yesterday. After a 28-hour flight and only a couple of hours sleep, I turned up at 8 o'clock in the morning for the hospital orientation, and I was greeted by the head nurse. She gave me a map, and she told me to go to the top floor of the hospital. When I got out of the lift, the sign said, melanoma unit. And I was confused. I'm a midwife. Surely they should be sending me to the mother and baby unit. What am I doing here? I went in and I introduced myself. Come in. We've been expecting you. Have a wander round and chat to some of the people who we have here with us today. The first person I met was Joe, a 62-year-old cattle farmer. He lived for the land. On his face was a gaping hole where his nose once was. Joe was really excited because this was the day that he was going to be getting his prosthetic nose, his fake nose. And all he wanted to do was get back out onto the land. Next, I met Matt, a 27-year-old surfer. He lived for the water. Matt had been told the devastating news that his melanoma had spread to his lungs and he only had weeks or a month to live. He was happy that day because he was organising a wedding. He was too ill to leave the hospital, but they were arranging for his childhood sweetheart to come into the hospital so that they could have a bedside wedding. That morning, I met many men and women, all with stories to share, stories of hope, stories of courage, stories of desperation, stories of fear. And I will never, ever forget what I saw, what I heard, what I felt on that day. And at the time I was confused, wondering, why are they sending me here? Perhaps as a newcomer to Australia, they were wanting to warn me about the harsh realities of the Australian sun. Surely they could have given me a brochure or some stats and figures. But the power of personal storytelling. I will never, ever forget that day. Ever since then, I've been quite happy to be the pearly white colour that I am. I do not go into the sun at all. Stories are so, so powerful. Let me ask you this. What stories from your life could you share that would change the lives of others? What stories from your life could you share that would have an incredible impact on the lives of others? I've created a journal called the Find a Story in 5 Storytelling Journal, and I've made this available for you guys to download. So you can pop into your browser, gettalk.at/D51. You can take a photo or pop it into your browser. It'll be available again later. So there are a couple of resources up there that you can download from my session today so that you can start capturing your stories. So I moved to Perth, Australia, and I got married and I had 3 daughters. And I'd spent over 20 years working as a midwife, and my life was pretty good. I'd go as far as to say my life was perfect, but like all fairy tales, mine has a twist. 12 years ago, without any warning, I woke up one morning, I fell to the ground, I couldn't even lift my head off the floor. The room was spinning violently. A virus destroyed a significant amount of my hearing. The nerves were damaged, and I was told that there was nothing that could be done. So there I was, having to come to the reality that with significant permanent hearing loss, it was no longer safe or practical for me to work in my chosen career as a neonatal intensive care specialist midwife. So I was faced with the reality of having to walk away from the only career that I'd ever known. And that was pretty tough. It was devastating. Deafness is an invisible disability. And people don't realise how debilitating it is. I didn't until it happened to me. I felt isolated. I felt withdrawn. I felt very low. And I asked myself the question over and over again, why me? And I was stuck. At that time, that was the story that I was telling myself. And then one day, I had the reality that only I could decide what my future was going to be. And I had the power to change the story. So instead of thinking, why me, I decided to think, why not me? Instead of thinking this had happened to me, started to think this was happening for me. And with that change in mindset came new possibilities. A chance meeting with a leading expert in hearing technology in Western Australia led me to get the amazing gift of a cochlear implant as part of a research trial. Neuroplasticity, the brain's amazing ability to learn to do something in a completely different way. The cochlear implant is not plug and play. The hard work starts once you get the device because you have to learn to use it. You have to learn to hear in a completely new way. And at first, the sounds that I got from the device were indecipherable. They weren't even human. And it took hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours of training and learning with the rehabilitation team to get used to learning the device. And then gradually, over many, many hours, I could make sense of a sound, and then a syllable, and then a word, and then a sentence, and then a paragraph. And during this time of intense rehabilitation, I was very committed, and I was spending a lot of time listening, a lot of time articulating words, sounding out words. But that sparked my interest in public speaking. And I decided 8-9 years ago that I wanted to learn all that I could about the art and science of speaking and storytelling. But first of all, I had to build some of my self-confidence. So where did I go to do that? I joined Toastmasters. And I'm not going to be doing my icebreaker speech this morning because my icebreaker speech was really, really bad. So I joined Toastmasters to rebuild my self-confidence, and I began to speak as often as I could. And I immersed myself in speaking and storytelling, and I learned all that I possibly could, and I continued. That's what I love about the craft of speaking. You know, wherever you are on the journey, there is always more to learn and more to find out. So it is an incredible skill. And I'm forever grateful for my Toastmasters family for allowing me the opportunity to speak and to serve and to share. And 3 years ago, I decided that I wanted to do more, that I really wanted to use my newfound voice to help others, to speak and to serve and to share, and most importantly, to empower others to use their voice. The most incredible, powerful tool that we all have is our voice. So I decided 3 years ago that I wanted to become a professional speaker. I started a business, and I now get to travel the world, speaking, serving, sharing, and I help leaders to create powerful presentations with compelling business stories. And I've been fortunate to have been trained and mentored by some of the best speakers in the world. I want you to reflect on this. You are the curator of your own story. You get to choose which story to tell and who you will get to share that story with. But the most important story is the one that you tell yourself. The most important story is the one that we tell ourselves. So let me ask you again, what stories from your childhood do you carry? Do those stories serve you, or do those stories stall you, stop you, and hold you back? Are there stories that you need to have the courage to loosen your grip on so that you can make way for new ones? Because our past stories can sabotage our future efforts. And for many years, you know, I was carrying the heavy burden of the story of not fitting in, of being shy, of pleasing others. But it was only when I was able to let go of that story that I was able to write the next chapter and to step into the more powerful and empowering story that I own now. And I believe that we all have stories worth sharing. And often in my role as a storytelling coach, I hear people say to me on an almost daily basis, I don't have any stories to share. I've only got an ordinary life. Raise your hand if you've got an average life. Raise your hand if you've got some ordinary stories, ordinary life. Ordinary stories told by ordinary people makes for extraordinary material, because it's when people have the courage to step up and share their story that something amazing takes place. So why tell stories? Why tell stories? Because stories are incredibly powerful. This is a bit of a busy picture, but I want to talk about the brain for a second. So stories allow us to create meaning from some complex material. Stories allow us to have a connection. Stories allow us to share an empathy. And the great thing about a story is stories cross culture and ages and boundaries. And the material is just so incredibly powerful. And with our brains, you know, when we hear facts or information or data, there are two main areas of the brain that light up, and they're called the Broca's and the Wernicke's area. And they are the centres that are responsible for data and language. And that's what happens. When we hear a story, multi-sensory areas of the brain light up. The visual, the olfactory, the sensory, the emotional. So already you're able to tap into a whole new area of the brain that you can't with information alone. And if you want to create change, you need to have an emotion, because without emotion, there is no change. As speakers and as leaders, we are change makers. And if we want to have an impact and we want to empower others to create that change, then we need to take them on an emotional journey. Would you agree? You may be familiar with the Significant Object Project. Raise your hand if you've heard of the Significant Object Project. You can have a look at it later on Wikipedia. So back in 2009, Rob Walker and Joshua Glenn decided to create a social experiment to prove the hypothesis that narrative transforms the insignificant to the significant. Narrative transforms the insignificant to the significant. So what they did is they went to the junk shop, the thrift shop, and they bought a range of random household items. Some of them were even a little bit broken. And they only spent no more than $4 for each of these items. Then what they did is they paired each item with a creative writer. And they asked the writer to make up a story about the item. And then when the item and the story were paired, they were put up onto eBay and sold. And they made it clear that it was a fictional story, so they were clear about that. So the items went up onto eBay, and what do you think happened to the value of the item? Not just by a little bit, by a massive amount. In that initial first experiment, they spent $128 on the items, and they made $3,700. And they continue to run this experiment over and over again. Fascinating stuff. They have a blog, they have books, they even have an object slam in San Francisco. So it's well worth reading the story. So in my storytelling, coaching and training that I do, I encourage people to be VIP storytellers. So VIP, V stands for vulnerable, I for intuition, and P for presence. So by vulnerability, I mean that we need to be willing to share not only the success stories, but also the struggle stories. Because life can be a struggle, right? So by being vulnerable, I mean that sometimes we need to be prepared to peel back some of the layers and talk about stuff that is more deeper, because that's the stuff that can reach out and touch and connect with other people. So be willing to be vulnerable. I for intuition. Intuition's an interesting one. And by intuition, I mean knowing when to share and give more, but equally as important, when to hold back. And an experienced speaker and storyteller has really good intuitive skills that we build up over time. And often in the beginning of our speaking journey, we can get focused on our content and focused on our words and focused on our slides and what am I going to say next and how do I look and all those things. But when we do that, we are really in our head. In order to be truly intuitive, we need to be in our hearts. Because when we can move from our head to our heart, that is when we're able to reach out and make a connection to an individual in the audience. And when we are intuitive, we can see what we're getting back from that audience. So we call it ping back, yeah? We can see what we're getting from our audience, and we can see whether they're ready for more or whether we need to change or hold back. So sometimes it's about being adaptable with your content. And P for presence. So being fully present in the moment is much better than, I talk a lot about presence over perfection. So often as speakers, we can get caught up in the tools and the techniques. So be present, be 100% present in the moment. Here are some of my storytelling tribe. I run live storytelling events, and we've created a book. I do have some of my books here today, a limited amount of books. Who had one of these as a child or played with one of these? Yeah? So a Matryoshka doll. And here's one of mine. I used to collect them as a kid. And we're very much like one of these dolls. Would you agree? We have a tough outside exterior, and this is often the exterior that we present to the world, right? This is what the world sees. But it's when we are willing to, it's got a bit of a squeak there. Take one of the layers off and look a little bit deeper inside, that we have a little bit more about who that person really is. Maybe we're willing to go even a little bit more deeper and get to the heart and the real core of that person. This is where the good stuff happens. Okay? This is where the real stuff happens. This is where the magic moments happen, when we are willing to peel off some of the layers and get a little bit deeper inside. Now, that's my little doll there. See, it's all in pieces now. Whoops. Sometimes from the messy things in life, later on when we reflect, that's where our most important messages are that we can share with others. But it does need to be the right time. So I talk about making sure that your story is ripe. And by that I mean, is your story ready to share? Because stories are precious, and we need to make sure that we are giving them away when needed. And also, if somebody shares a story with us, that we keep that story and we honour that storyteller. So consider before you share a story, is that story ripe and ready to be told? And I know for myself personally, and I'm sure many of you and many people I've spoken to, sometimes there may be something in your life that you're not ready to share. And then when the time is right and you've learnt those valuable lessons and the wisdom from that experience, then that's a good time to share that story. So stories are everywhere, and you've probably got your own method of capturing and harnessing your own stories, but I talk about creating a story bank, but whichever way works for you. Some people are pen and paper, some people like an app. So I use the app called Evernote to capture my stories, and I like it because it's free, it syncs across all my devices, and I've got it handy. So when I see a story or I think about a story, and often they come at all sorts of random times, I hop onto Evernote and I will give the story a short, meaningful title. Then in the body of the document, I'll just put a few words. I certainly don't write it out. I put a few words in the body of the document. And then I take some time and think about the key words. The great thing about Evernote is there's a really good keyword search function. So I'll give each story 4 or maybe even 5 different keywords so that it's easy to search later. And then when I'm asked to do a presentation on a particular topic, I can go to my story bank. I think I have about 2,500 stories in my story bank, and I can pop in the keyword and up will come the stories that are relevant to that topic. So it's about being able to find your stories for later and have them in some sort of a filing system so that you can come back to. But I encourage you all to sort and store your stories in a way that works for you. So there are many different storytelling frameworks, and I've studied most of them in quite some detail. And a lot of them are, you're probably familiar with The Hero's Journey, Joseph Campbell, 1949, which was simplified by Christopher Vogler in the 70s. And there's also Freytag's Triangle. There are lots of Freytag's Pyramid. There are lots of different storytelling frameworks. But what I've done is I've boiled them all down, and I've come up with one that works really well that I want to share with you, which is really, really super simple. So I call mine the 5 C's of compelling storytelling. So feel free to take pictures as we go along, and I'm also happy to send you the slides. So the 5 C's of compelling storytelling, these are the 5 C's. We have context, we have challenge, we have choice, we have change, and we have carry out. And surrounding our story, we have curiosity, okay? Because as we tell a story, we want people to be sitting up thinking, what comes next, right? So we have curiosity. So let's start with the first C. The first C is context. So the context is quite simply setting the scene. And it's important to do this quickly. Often people will drag on the beginning of the story a little bit. So set the scene quickly. We just need, who, what, where, when. That is enough detail from the beginning. And it could simply be one line. It was 4 a.m. and I was on the way to the airport for a secret meeting. And then I got a text message. You're thinking, oh, I wonder what happens next. Hopefully you're thinking that. There's a totally made-up story. I don't know what happens next. But that is enough for a context. We are just very briefly setting the scene. With our story, we have two main characters, a minimum of two main characters. And our main character is often called our hero. And our hero is going on a journey. And very early on in the story, we need to have a challenge or a struggle. We need to have some obstacles that are facing the main character on their journey. And the challenge needs to come early on. So by challenge, it hasn't got to be like a massive challenge. It could be a small challenge, or it could be a series of challenges or obstacles that are stopping the main character from where they are now to getting to where they want to be. So for example, a physical challenge or obstacle can be something that's literally in the way. The traffic's so bad in Kuala Lumpur that you can't get to your Toastmasters meeting. So you have a physical challenge there. You're nodding your head. It happens a lot, right? It may be, an environmental challenge. There could be a tsunami or a flood or something that's stopping you on your journey. Or it could be an internal challenge. Perhaps it is an attitude or a behaviour or an internal thought or feeling that is stopping you from moving forward. And often with the main character of the story, this conflict or challenge goes on for some time. Then a second character is introduced, and this character is called the mentor or the guru in the story. And the mentor or the guru offers some kind of advice, the skill, possibly giving the main character a tool to use. And the mentor is usually a physical person. Yep, so think Gandalf, Lord of the Rings, Dumbledore, Harry Potter, the good witch in Wizard of Oz. It's usually a physical person. It can be an animal. It can also be a spirit. It may be a dream, or it could be a voice. But the mentor meets the main character when they are going through a challenge and offers them, guides them, and helps them move to the next step. So at this point we have a choice. So we have the main character meets the mentor, and there is a choice to be made. Do they accept their help and their wisdom and the new tool so they can move forward, or not? But in the story, of course, they always do. So in the next part of the story, so here we have an aha moment. We have, what was the defining moment where things changed for our main character who's going along their journey. And then this part of the story, we have our change. So this is where the transformation takes place. How is the main character in the story different at this point in time than where they were at the beginning of the story? Because our story is a journey. How are they different? What has the transformation been that has taken place due to that meeting of the mentor? And the most important part of the story is the carry out. What lesson have you learned from that experience that you went through that you can then pass on to others? That's the gold in the story, the carry out. What is the message in that story that you've learned through your experience that you can then share with others? So those are the 5 C's of compelling storytelling. And then with our story, to help bring it to life, we add LOTS. So LOTS is an acronym for language of the senses. So we add some sensory language to bring our stories to life. To ask yourself when you're recreating your story, what did you see? What were the sights that you experienced during that time? What are the visual things that you can describe? What were the things that you heard? What did you hear during that time? Were there any particular tastes or smells? The other sense that I'm missing out here with the slide is, what did you feel or what did you touch? So adding some language of the senses. Now this tool is very useful. It's a little bit small, but you can look it up on Wikipedia. It's called Plutchik. Has anybody heard of Plutchik's Wheel of Emotion? So Plutchik, he mapped every human emotion, and they're charted on this wheel here. Sometimes it's called Plutchik's flower. And you will see each petal of that flower has the intensity of the emotion. And where you've got the arrow there pointing to joy, around that wheel there, starting with joy, trust, fear, they are the 8 universal emotions that every human experiences. So when you are creating your story or thinking what story to share, ask yourself, what is the universal emotion at the heart of my story? Only I have my story and only I can share my story in the way that I do. But if I have a story that's based on courage, or I may have a story based on frustration or fear, we have all experienced that common emotion. So be clear on what the emotion is of your story. Now, of course, our presentation, our story, our speech is a gift. And when we choose a gift for somebody, we go to the shop and we select the gift for them. And then we don't give the person the gift in the bag that we got it from the shop in, unless you're my husband, he does. But what you do is you then wrap the gift up in a nice ribbon or a lovely piece of paper or a box. So our content of our speech or our story, that is only one dimension. We need to think about the whole package, the whole gift, and how we're going to wrap up that gift to deliver it beautifully. Yep, so that's where our other speaking tools come in. Yep, so we have our body language, okay? What's your body saying about you? Do we have nice tall posture and stance? Do we have open postures versus closed postures? We don't want to be making ourselves small. So bring your story to life with effective body language, because our body also not only demonstrates our gestures and adds to our story, but also it affects the way we feel. Yeah. So if you want to feel more confident, you need to act more confident, because actions of confidence come before feelings of confidence, which is kind of a bit like fake it till you become it, Amy Cuddy stuff, right? The body language is really important. Now, you guys, all Toastmasters, this is 101 stuff. You know all this. It's just a friendly reminder. Eye contact, what are you doing with your eyes? Are you engaging with your audience and looking into their eyes? Have you got a beautiful smile, a crow's feet smile, like this gorgeous lady here? And often the smile is the most easiest gesture to use, but it's the one that's forgotten. When we kind of get caught up into our head and we get a little bit nervous or excited, our facial nerves deaden and we forget to smile. So remember to smile. It changes your endorphins, it changes the way you feel, and it certainly makes a positive impact on our audience. What about our voice? What wonderful things can we do with our voice? So I use the acronym RSVP for the voice. R is for rhythm, S is for speed, V is for volume, and P is for pitch. All equally important. Rhythm is really the musicality of your voice, sounding conversational. We do it all the time in everyday language, but often when we get on stage or we get up in front of a group of an audience and we put on the hat of presenter, something happens. What happened to that person? Where's their... So think conversational. Yeah, public speaking is no more than having a conversation with many. So keep your voice conversational. Have that nice musicality to your voice. Speed, very, very important. Most people speak way too fast, so slow down so that you can be understood, so that people can really enjoy your story. And don't be afraid of pause. Confidence is being comfortable with silence. Be comfortable with silence, and it's often harder for newer Toastmasters when you're starting out on your journey. You want to fill in the gaps with words so that we can get on, get off, and we just learn to enjoy and celebrate those silences. Okay, so we are going to do a couple of story mining exercises together. The first one we are going to do is so super simple. What I want you to do is I want you to take out your mobile phone. Raise your hand if you don't have a mobile phone. Oh, what? If you don't have a mobile phone, find a partner that does. So take out your mobile phone and go to your photo album. And I want to give you 30 seconds to find a photo in your photo album. It could be something wonderful that you had to eat out there this morning. It could be a wonderful memory from last night. It could be your favourite fur baby or your home or your garden. Whatever it is, it needs to be something that you are willing to share with somebody else. Don't overthink it, just pick a photo. This is my greyhound Tom. He features in all my speeches. Have you all got a photo? You have? Okay. So what I'd like to invite you to do now, if you're willing and able, is to get up out of your seats, because we are going to move. You are going to walk around and you are going to find somebody, and then when the music stops, you are going to take a couple of minutes each sharing the story of the photo that you have chosen. And then when I raise my hand, we'll come back to the room. So are we ready to do that? Let's go.
It might seem crazy what I'm about to say. Sunshine, she's here, you can take a break. I'm a hot air balloon that could go to space. With the air, like I don't care, baby, by the way. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like happiness is.
Okay, you now have 2 minutes each to share the story of your photo. Okay, back to the room. Finish up. Finish up. Sit back to your seats. Yep. Let's move on to the next exercise. Back to the room. Okay. I need the bell. Okay, everyone, take your seat. Back to the room. Finish up your stories. Sit back down.
The last person to sit down will have to come and make a speech.
Sit. Okay, we are going to be doing another storytelling exercise together, so I will invite you to share again, but for now, if you can please sit down after your story. Wow, you must have some amazing stories on your phone. Okay, everyone, sit down. Come on, let's get back to the room. Everyone, shh. Sit down. Come on. Finish up. Gosh, you have so many stories, District 51. I'm really looking forward to hearing some of these stories tonight at the gala, at the masquerade ball. Okay, so are you ready to do another story exercise? Yes? Raise your hands if you can hear me. Raise your hand if you can hear me. Fabulous. Okay, let's do story mining exercise number 2. That first one was easy, right? We have stories at our fingertips. Okay, so the next storytelling exercise that I'm going to share with you is called SIFT. And SIFT stands for S for stuff up, I for imperfection, F for firsts, and T for transformations. So individually, how they look is S for stuff ups. So stuff ups are those mistakes that you made in your life with a consequence. Things that maybe you look back on that you could have done a little bit differently. Perhaps you made a mistake at work with a consequence. Perhaps you messed up a relationship that you could have done differently. So the first category is stuff ups. The second category is imperfection. What are those little quirky habits or flaws that you have? Don't tell me you don't have any, like a keynote speaker, that drive others crazy. Or what are the flaws in others that drive you crazy? Yeah? F for firsts. This is the easiest category. Firsts. First holiday. First Toastmasters meeting. First car. First love. First pet. There's lots of material in firsts. Very easy category if you can't think of a story, which I know none of you will have that problem. And the final one is transformation. So the transformation stories, these are the bigger ticket stories. These are the stories that, since that occasion, that experience, life hasn't been the same. So these are the bigger stories. So what I want you to do, listen carefully to the instructions, and then I'm going to invite you to share another story. But first of all, we are going to spend some time quietly writing out a story. Now, it doesn't have to be word for word. There's paper and pens at the back, or you can write on your phones. What I want you to do is this. I want you to choose one category only. So we're only writing one story, and you're choosing either stuff up, imperfection, first, or transformations. And I'm going to give you 5 minutes to write out your story, and if you possibly can, incorporate the 5 C's of compelling storytelling. Think, most importantly, about setting the scene briefly. What is the challenge that the main character is facing? Who's the mentor that they meet that helps them along the way? And how have they changed? And what is that one lesson that you are sharing with the other person? So if possible, try and fit it into this shape. Context, challenge, choice, change, carry out. Okay, so 5 minutes to just quietly write down your little story. It does need to be something that you are willing to share with somebody else. Okay, everyone clear on the instructions? Great, let's go. Get writing. Okay, finish up your story. And what we are going to do now is I'm going to invite you in a sec to get up, to move, to find a different person, and then when the music stops, you will take 2 minutes each to share your SIFT story with the other person. And please, when we have finished the 2 minutes each, we'll come back to the room because I've still got some more to share with you. How does that sound? Okay, let's do it, District 51. Okay. Finish up your stories and make your way back to your seat. Finish up your stories and make your way back to your seats. Okay, that's it. Enough. Back to your seats. Okay, let's finish up with a bit more content. Are we ready? Raise your hand if you can hear me. Raise your hands if you can hear me. We have some people. Okay, clap once if you can hear me. Clap twice if you can hear me. Okay, let's go. Sit down, everybody. Next part of the content. Okay, wow, you guys have a lot of stories. And I'm looking forward to hearing some of them later. Okay, everybody, sit down. Okay. Back to the room. District 51, back to the room. Okay, so I just want to share with you Okay, it's almost lunchtime. It's almost lunchtime. You guys have some amazing stories, and I'm looking forward to hearing more of them tonight at the Masquerade Ball, because you've obviously got so many stories. It's a mistake to ask a group of Toastmasters for 2 minutes only. Okay, so making your story come to life with the stage. So obviously, once you've created your story and once you've created your story, we want to make our story come to life by using the stage. So using the space that we have available to us. And we've seen that already with some of our speakers that we've already have. So mapping your moves and using the space that we have here. And you're maybe all familiar with these stage maps. So first of all, we have the position of power, which is the place that we usually start and finish our speech or our story. And often we come back to this power position when we have something really important that we want to say. Sometimes we even take a step forward or two so that we can get that proximity with our audience. Rarely do we step back. So this is the position of power. When we are sharing a story and we want to use a timeline and we are talking about the past, which area of the stage do we use for the past? Show me, which side? Yes, we use this side of the stage to represent the past. Yep. So audience is left, presenters right. So when we are talking about the future, where do we stand? Yeah. So if we're using the timeline, the future is over here. Yeah. Okay. So in closing, I spent many years trying to be somebody else, desperately trying to fit in and please others. And it was only when I was willing to loosen the grip and have the courage to let go of the story that no longer served me that I could make way for a new one. Spent so many years trying to fit in. I love this quote by Dr. Seuss. Why fit in when you were born to stand out? And I'd like to encourage every one of you to step up and share your stories. And I want to leave you with this other little acronym that I use. And the word is sugary. I know that in Malaysia you like sugary things. Your coffee has got so much sugar in. It's quite addictive. That 3-layered coffee with the caramel and the sugar and the more sugar and the milk and the sugar. So you'll like this acronym. You'll be able to remember this. So sugary stands for show up as the genuine, authentic and real you. Because when we are teaching and touching, we are creating a connection. And that's what it's all about. Would you agree, Toastmasters? But when we are focusing on tools and techniques, we are aiming for perfection. Connection trumps perfection every single time. But often in Toastmasters, we do have to learn the rules. We've got to learn the techniques in order to break them. I love this quote by Pablo Picasso. Learn the rules like a pro so that you can break them like an artist. Be present. Aim for connection every time rather than perfection. Forget about your words. Forget about your slides. Be fully present in the moment. Be willing to be vulnerable and share your stories, because your stories can make a significant impact and change the lives of others. So I'll leave you with one final acronym. DARE storytelling. Storytelling, to be effective and magical, needs to be dynamic. It needs to be authentic, which we've spoken about. Your stories need to be repeatable. I'm sure we'll be repeating the keynote story around the oil rig and the insurance salesman, because they were very repeatable stories. And of course, your stories need to be engaging. I have a limited amount of my books available today. The Storytelling Journal, you can download that as a PDF fillable journal. And you can fill it in, and you can get it from, Get Talk. So gettalk.at/D51. You can download a speaker's checklist as well as the story journal. And my other two books are Speaking Savvy, The Art of Speaking and Storytelling, and Stories from the Heart, which is a collection of inspirational short stories. I'm Lisa Evans, the Story Midwife. It has been my absolute pleasure to be serving Toastmasters today. Please connect with me on these platforms. I love hearing and sharing stories. But most of all, I want to encourage you to share your stories. Let's change the world together, one story at a time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. One more big round of applause to distinguished Toastmaster Lisa Evans, the Story Midwife.
Let's do a selfie together.
Looks like a trend, everyone. Big smile.
Oh, why won't it work? Why won't it work? Oh. I want to use my phone. Back up. We're just doing a selfie together.
All right, everyone. One more. Big smile on your face.
I don't know what happened to my phone. It's died. Yeah, here we are. Here we are. Okay, hands up.
Hands up, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Lisa. Please remain on the stage because we would like to give away a thank you certificate. At this moment, we'd like to invite our District Director, Andrew Tan, to be standing on the stage. Andrew.
Oh, sorry.
Don't forget, Lisa's book is available outside at the booth area. Thank you very much to Lisa. Everyone, a big round of applause.